Welcome to this rapid revision video looking at exam skills. This time we're going to be looking at paper 2. This is the British depth study and we're going to be looking at the topic of early Elizabethan England for this particular demonstration. We're going to be looking at question 1c. That's question 1c 1 and 2, so you've got an option here. How far do you agree? It's the big one, 16 marks. So let's get into it. Firstly, a reminder of how this paper is structured. It's traditionally split into two. One is a British depth study, e.g. Early Elizabethan England 1558 to 88, and the other is a European or wider world depth study, e.g. the American West 1830 to 1895. In the past, these have been provided as separate booklets answered within the same exam, although on one occasion they were taken as separate exams. The time allowed for each section is 55 minutes, so that's how long you'll have to answer the entire paper. This particular practice is going to be focused on the British depth study, Early Elizabethan England, 1558 to 88. Let's have a look at the question. Firstly, note the instructions. You will have a choice of two different questions here, so don't try answering them both. You should answer either question 1c1 or question 1c2. Each is worth 16 marks. So choose your question carefully. It's going to be worth a large amount of the marks for the entire paper. Each question is asking you how far you agree with a particular issue. It also allows you to use particular stimulus points, but bear in mind that you shouldn't just stick to these points. You must also use information of your own in order to achieve full marks. The one that we're going to be focusing on today is question C2. You'll have to indicate this clearly on the sheet. The revolt of the Northern Earls was the most significant challenge to Elizabeth's rule in the years 1569 to 86. It's often a good idea to write a very brief plan if this helps you at this stage. You might want to add bullet points to the stimulus points, depending on what other examples you're going to include. Perhaps you should also note down what your opinion is. How far do you agree that the revolt of the Northern Earls was the most significant challenge to Elizabeth? Also take note in particular of things like the dates. Don't be given examples from outside of 1569 to 86. You should decide how far you agree, to a great extent, to a limited extent, whatever you think. And you should aim to spend about 25 minutes in total on this answer. We'll have a quick look at the mark scheme as well. This is what the examiner will be using when assessing your work. A reminder of the question then. The revolt of the Northern Earls was the most significant challenge to Elizabeth's rule in the years 1569 to 86. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. We'll look at the key differences between level 3 and level 4 answers, as we should be aiming this sort of high. You'll see that for level 3 you should be showing some analysis or explanation which is mainly directed at the conceptual focus of the question. That's in comparison to this, which says an analytical explanation is given which is directed consistently at the conceptual focus of the question. So it's more focused and precise for level 4. Accurate and relevant information is included, showing a good knowledge. Compare that to this. Accurate and relevant information is precisely selected to address the question, showing a wide-ranging knowledge and understanding. So it's not like you're just writing everything that you know on the topic. You are selecting really good detailed knowledge that addresses the question directly. The overall judgment, so your opinion, is given with some justification compared to this. Criteria for the relevant required judgment, in other words, various reasons that you're coming to that judgment, are justified and applied in the process of reaching the overall judgment. Do be aware though, you only get a maximum of 11 marks for level 3 answers that do not go beyond the aspects prompted in the stimulus points. That's the bullet points you saw on this previous screen. So make sure that you do include plenty of your own knowledge. You cannot get level 4 if you don't include your own knowledge. Before we get into this example answer, a bit of full disclosure. I'm basically a pupil of this topic too. I've never taught it, although I am hoping to soon. However, I have been trying to learn the topic inside out so that I become an effective teacher when I do get the chance to teach it. That means I might make the odd mistake. Obviously I won't mean to, and hopefully I won't have because I have been careful. But if you notice something that you really disagree with, or if I have made some sort of awful blunder, put it in the comments below and I'll see if I can address it. The first thing that you'll need to do though is to indicate which question you're doing. We're going to be looking at question C2 about the revolt of the Northern Earls. I'll be making my points in blue, giving examples from both my own knowledge and the stimulus points in red, explaining those examples with further own knowledge and explanation in green, linking it back to the question in purple, and then evaluating the strength of my argument in black. So let's get into it. I largely disagree that the revolt of the Northern Earls was the most significant threat between 1569 and 1586. Mary Queen of Scots was a bigger threat. So right out of the gates, I've given my opinion here, and I'm now going to spend the rest of the answer trying to back that up, but also looking at both sides. So let's consider the ways in which the revolt of the Northern Earls was a threat first of all. Although the revolt failed due to the quick action by the Earl of Sussex and troops loyal to Elizabeth, it did have significant effects that made it a threat to Elizabeth's rule. For example, it resulted in Elizabeth's excommunication by papal bull in 1570. This made it a threat because the excommunication forced English Catholics to choose between loyalty to Elizabeth or loyalty to their faith. This would embolden future plotters. How seriously Elizabeth took this threat is shown in her brutal suppression of Northern Catholics and the creation of the Council of the North to enforce Elizabeth's laws. 450 rebels were executed after the revolt. This made the revolt a serious threat. Notice how I've linked back to the question here. This made the revolt a serious threat as it meant all English Catholics were now under suspicion and there would be further Catholic plots. And Elizabeth did not take the opportunity to decisively deal with either the Duke of Norfolk or Mary Queen of Scots. However, despite this, the threat of the revolt was limited by the fact that even after Elizabeth's repressive measures, most Northern Catholics remained loyal. So let's consider where I'm picking up the marks here. You'll get marks for AO1, which is knowledge, you get 6 marks for that, and you'll get 10 marks for AO2, which is your analysis. So I've given my judgment at the start, which is largely going to be AO2 or analysis. We've got a bit of both in the next two sections, both knowledge, AO1, and AO2 while I'm explaining. And then we got further analysis when I'm linking it back to the question and when I'm evaluating. So far I've demonstrated both some of the threats that were there from the revolt of the Northern Earls, but also I've linked it back to the question and said why I don't think it was necessarily the biggest threat. What we're going to have a look at now, though, are the other examples which more directly support my opinion. Notice that the dates are 1569 to 1586, which gives us some pretty obvious candidates to go for our next examples. So let's get into that paragraph. I'll be using the same colour coding again. Let's see what I've gone for. However, there were other serious threats to Elizabeth's rule too, many of them Catholic plots. In 1571, the Ridolfi plot was uncovered. This was uncovered in a series of letters between Mary Queen of Scots and Roberto Ridolfi trying to incite a Spanish invasion and depose Elizabeth, placing Mary on the throne, married to the Duke of Norfolk. This showed that there was still a serious Catholic threat to Elizabeth following the papal bull, even though the plot was soon uncovered and Norfolk was executed. Alright, I'm now supporting the opinion I gave earlier that I felt that other plots were more important. I've mentioned Mary Queen of Scots again, who I mentioned in my brief introduction. But I'm going to need some more evidence, so let's go for another example. Similarly, the Throckmorton plot of 1583 planned to incite a French invasion and install Mary on the throne. The Babington plot of 1586 also sought to murder Elizabeth, arrange a French invasion this time, and restore England to Catholicism with Mary as Queen. This showed that Mary Queen of Scots remained a threat to Elizabeth throughout this period, as she was a focal point for Elizabeth's Catholic enemies, and she had a reasonably good claim to the throne. So again, I get some more AO2 analysis marks for my point here, a bit of both for my examples and my explanation here, and I give further details and explanation too. Remember that AO1 is knowledge and AO2 is analysis. So I'm providing plenty of good knowledge, and I'm linking it back to the question as well. But also, I'm trying to be consistent here. I said right at the start that I thought that Mary Queen of Scots was a bigger threat, and I've mentioned her several times within these examples. Giving some good supporting examples might not be enough on its own though. We need to really link it back to the question. Was the revolt of the Northern Earls the most serious threat that Elizabeth faced? These later Catholic plots were a very serious threat, as they involved planned Catholic invasions of England, and had that happened, the Duke of Alba's army in the Netherlands would have been very dangerous. They also have a common theme in that they were centred on or involved Mary Queen of Scots. This was a particular threat because of her quite legitimate claim to Elizabeth's throne and the fact that Elizabeth was repeatedly reluctant to execute a fellow anointed monarch, in case it inspired plots against her. This only changed after the Babington plot was thwarted and Mary was eventually executed. However, these plots were all uncovered and eventually defeated through the effective interception of letters and infiltration of the plotters by Elizabeth's agents. It is also doubtful that either France or Spain were in a good position at this time to actually invade, limiting the threat again. So I've got more analysis here. but I still really need to nail down my conclusion, so let's move on to that next. Your conclusion is going to be your very best opportunity to make sure that you've given a very clear judgment so that you can hit those top levels. Overall, I largely disagree that the revolt of the Northern Earls was the most serious threat to Elizabeth's rule in the years 1569 to 86, because Mary Queen of Scots was a more serious threat. Although the revolt of the Northern Earls was a serious rebellion that raised a substantial force against Elizabeth, it was defeated quite easily. It was followed by Elizabeth's excommunication and subsequent plots by Catholics. Mary Queen of Scots was a common factor between these and other plots, with Mary being proposed as a Catholic alternative to Elizabeth, inciting her murder or removal from the throne. Therefore, Mary Queen of Scots was the most serious threat to Elizabeth, as she was at the focal point of all the major Catholic plots between 1569 and 86. Though these plots were typically uncovered and defeated quickly, Elizabeth found the issue of Mary difficult to deal with, as she was reluctant to execute a fellow monarch and inspire similar actions against herself. Again, we've got more analysis, more knowledge and analysis, and even more analysis. I included a really brief single or two sentence introduction at the start of this, and my conclusion matches this. Do bear in mind though that there's nothing in the mark scheme that says that you have to have an introduction, but I often think it's a good idea to set out your stall early and let the examiner know that you have got a judgment here. If you're not confident about this, and if you think you might change your mind halfway through your answer though, you might want to just make sure that you've written a really good conclusion rather than having that matching introduction. It's really up to you. Now we've had a go at an example answer, you might want to have a go at answering one of your own. You could choose one of these questions here. The threat of invasion was Elizabeth's main problem when she became queen in 1558. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. You may use the following in your answer: France and Elizabeth's legitimacy. You must also use information of your own. And then the other question. Religion was the main cause of the revolt of the Northern Earls in 1569 to 70. Okay, that's pretty similar to the question we've just done in terms of the knowledge that you'll have to have, but it also happens to be a real exam questions. Sometimes the examiners just seem to get stuck on one topic. Anyway, the stimulus points that they give you for this one here are Catholic grievances and the Earls of Northumberland and Westmoreland. Our final points then. 16 mark how far do you agree questions require detailed knowledge, but mostly a strong and consistent argument. You will be provided with 2 stimulus points which you may use, but you will need to include examples from your own knowledge too. You will need to explain your opinion in terms of how far, to a large extent, limited extent, do you disagree? Well, in which case, how far? Just make sure that you make your opinion crystal clear. That's the end of this rapid revision video. Thanks very much for watching and I hope it has been useful. Again, I'm still getting to give grips to this topic a little bit myself, so if you've got any suggestions for me or if you really disagree with my interpretation here, stick it in the comments below and maybe we'll get a discussion going. But thanks for watching again, and if it has been useful, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Thanks for watching and goodbye.